Hi, my name is Melissa Silverstein. I'm the artistic director and co-founder of the Athena Film Festival. On behalf of Barnard College and Women in Hollywood, it is my honor to welcome you to the 12th annual Athena Film Festival. This festival is dedicated to celebrating the stories of bold, courageous women leaders and the filmmakers who bring these stories to life. Thank you for joining us. This year's festival would not be possible without the support of our dedicated sponsors. Please join me in thanking Athena's founding sponsor, the Artemis Rising Foundation, and its CEO and founder, Regina K. Scully, whose visionary leadership makes our work possible. To all of our sponsors, whose names you will see before each film and event, thank you for your commitment to challenging our culture to be more inclusive and inspiring audiences in the process. Today, I'm here to introduce a very exciting panel, and it is called Let's Talk About Sets, How Intimacy Coordinators Are Making Sets Safer. This is something that has occurred in the post-Weinstein world, and it's super exciting to have a conversation about how these people are helping to make people more comfortable in the work that they're doing. So I'm going to bring on our panelists now. First, I wanted to introduce our moderator, Laura Bradley. She's an entertainment reporter for the Daily Beast, and she wrote a really important story about intimacy coordinators in Vanity Fair a couple of years ago and helped inspire us to do this panel. Thank you for joining us, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to be here today with Ita O'Brien, who is an intimacy coordinator and movement director for film, television, and theater, as well as Kirsten Baity, who is an intimacy director and coordinator, sex educator, playwright, and teaching artist. Welcome. Oh, Ita, I think you might be muted.
Thank you very much, Laura. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
So let's get started. I'd love to just ask first, in each of your own words, what exactly is an intimacy coordinator and what is their function in a production?
So shall I start?
Yes.
An intimacy coordinator is a practitioner who brings a professional process and structure to working and developing intimate content in a production, be it in theatre, TV, or film, and also in teaching of intimacy in drama schools and in the industry. So what we put in place is supporting the producer and the production to put in place best practice across the arc of a whole production, inviting first of all, open communication and transparency when working with the intimate content, and then putting in place a process that invites agreement and consent that's across the board for everybody, for director, performers, crew, regarding the intimate content, and then putting in place clear choreography for the intimate content, allowing every beat of the director's vision to be served and allowing the actors to bring all of their skills as professional actors to the character and to every single beat of the intimate content, allowing everybody to make the best content for this production.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Kirsten, what about you? Anything to add?
Wonderfully said. A way that I like to put it is we're here for the stories that involve people drawing from their own identities, whether that's their race, disability, religion, age, and making sure that all of that stuff is approached with like proper cultural context and competency and understanding that, these are the stuff that we do in our everyday lives. A lot of the stuff that intimacy choreographers and coordinators are called for is for the stuff that like we don't usually swing swords at each other's heads. So when we put the swords away, we know that we're done, but we do hug our moms, we do kiss our partners and stuff like that. And so we want to find ways of like making it be like, this is a character moment. This is a me personally as an actor moment. The shorthand that I use when I teach about this to young people is like, if your boss at like a pizza restaurant asked you to do this with your coworker, would you be planning on an HR write-up? If so, that is when you should call an intimacy worker. But yeah, I also think that you said it perfectly. You hit all the pieces.
Both very well put. And Kirsten, I'd love to start with you for this one. I also was wondering for each of you, what drew you to this work?
I was an actor and I was in college and I did a show that just was very mishandled. There was a lot of stuff going on. Specifically, I was playing two different characters, and between the two of them, they had like if there was a list of everything that you would want to call an intimacy person for, all of it. They did all of the stuff was there, and we didn't have one. And I was just like, ooh, this. I finished the show, and it was still sitting with me, all of these feelings and stuff like that. And I was like, there has to be a better way to stage this. There has to be a better way to do this. And fortunately, I went to Columbia College Chicago, and they have a huge stage combat program that was starting to get into working with intimacy as well. And so I had a teacher who was like, well, this is the path you follow. So that's how I got in. That's how I like first started understanding what this was. And then in 2020, I had so much free time all of a sudden. And I heard about Ann James, and she was starting Intimacy Coordinators of Color. She needed someone to do the social media work. And I was like, hey, can I get lessons if I do your social media? And so I've been getting that mentorship, and that's how I've ended up where I am now.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Ito, what about you? What drew you to this work?
So my pathway has been a very natural and organic one. My journey in this profession has been as a dancer, a musical theatre dancer, an actor, and then a movement teacher and a movement director, and then writing my own work and also devising my own work. And in the devising process, I was looking at a piece of work exploring the perpetrator and the victim. This was back in 2014, and I was considering if I'm going to ask actors to come and explore this dynamic in a devised way, how do I keep my actors safe? What practices and processes do I need to put in place in order to allow my actors to be present, centered, and grounded in themselves, with each other, and in the space, in order to explore this kind of dynamic in a really present and professional and safe way? And then in particular at the end of each rehearsal day and at the end of the process, how do I also support them to step away from this work, in a really healthy and professional and robust way? And so that was my exploration. I did 1 year of research and development in 2014, and then followed that up in 2015. But during that process, one of my colleagues, Meredith Duffton, who's the head of movement at Mount View, said, please come and teach what you're developing. I'm having to note all the intimate content in the plays that my second and third years are doing, and invariably all of them have got intimate content. But when I note it, when I say, actually, this is the physicality that needs to be portrayed, their eyes would glaze over, because there was no professional process in which to create it safely. So she said, please come and teach what you're developing. So I started teaching the work in April 2015, and then over the years developed the process, developed the protocols, and then started to try and share the work with the industry, with Equity, in early 2017. And then I shared the work with the Personal Managers Association, which was the first time that I pulled together what would become the Intimacy Onset Guidelines, and then was back trying to speak to Equity. And then in October, the Me Too, what the Weinstein allegations arose, and then subsequent Me Too and Time's Up movements. And most importantly, the industry saying we have to do better. We can't turn a blind eye to this predatory behaviour. And so therefore the codes of conduct that got put in place. And then I was ready to say, and within the codes of conduct, within the industry's intention to work in a better way with respect for everybody, this is then how you can work with the intimate content, giving respect for all.
Again, that's such a wonderfully put answer. I love especially the words present, centered, and grounded as far as what you're trying to bring out of your performers. And it made me think of another thing I wanted to discuss with you both, which is, how do you interface with directors? And through that process, how do you then empower and protect performers so that they can be, as you say, present, centered, and grounded? Kirsten, let's start with you.
Sure. A lot of times when I'm working with a director, I do a lot of like student films or stuff that's within academic film processes and theater processes. And a lot of times it's the first time meeting an intimacy coordinator. And so they're usually just like, what do you do? What is your job even? So that's the first thing, is explaining what I'm here to do. And then sometimes explaining what you're not here for. Like, I'm not the fun police. I'm not like here to be like, you can't say that, or don't do this, or don't do that. Talking about walking them through the process of what I'm going to ask the actors to do, walking them through the process of what I need from them. How do they want to communicate? Some people want me to communicate with like their assistant director, and that's easier to pass the information that way. Other people are like, no, come sit by me. Like, come sit right here and hold my hand through this process. And so just kind of being there and seeing like how best to work with them. Because I think that while so many people think about intimacy work from the perspective of actors, we're also here for, the DP. We also can be here for the director. Sometimes those are the people who need us more in specific productions, because they are the ones who might be activated or triggered by the content more than the actors are. So just like letting them know, it's like, I'm here for you too. I'm not here to like guard the actors from you. I don't think you've done anything wrong. And then telling them what a boundary practice is, telling them, this is the amount of time that I need. Is that okay? Like, do you have that kind of time? Do you want me to be there more time? Do you need less? Just figuring out what is necessary for them. And I also have a list, like I'm working on, and it's getting longer and longer with every show I do, of saying what it is that is going to be necessary for this show. And it's different for every single show, right? Right now I'm working on a piece where they need modesty garments but can't afford them. So it's like, great, here's how, like, now I'm doing a packet of, here's how you make this thing, or make something that will do the same thing as this thing. So it's just like lots of conversations. I'm trying to get as much done before we get actors into a rehearsal space or into or onto set as possible, so that when we get there, we're not figuring stuff out besides making sure the choreography works within their boundaries. We figured out all of the director stuff, all the costume things, and then we can just focus on this one thing when we get in the room.
That's a really good point, especially about the fact that you're not only empowering performers, but really everyone on a set at every level of production to do their best work. Ita, did that sound really reflective of your process as well? Is there anything that you do differently?
No, that sounds really good. What Kirsten has set out there. This is it. As she was saying, it has been, a lot of our work has been education as well, as Kirsten was saying, that we're explaining what the process is and how it works. And that's where very often on a new production, I'll say, again, as I said right from the get-go, we're there first, we're the ally of all the different practitioners, and it's about putting in place best practice across a whole production. So we're there first of all supporting the producer, the idea of putting in place the process for the production so that everybody has got a clear boundary and is taken care of. Directors in the early days were going, well, I don't want you coming in and taking over. And again, it's that being really clear that if you think we're a practitioner that's your ally to the director, that we're bringing in the skills of body awareness and of choreography, just like their stunt coordinator. So so if you think of your stunt coordinator, you're either your fight or a stunt that you want in your production. You're going to sort of talk to your stunt coordinator about what you want, do storyboards, and then figure out how you're going to work that. The stunt coordinator is going to put in place their risk assessment. We're going to listen to the director, and I'm always saying, we're here to serve your vision. First and foremost, it's always we're the ally of the director. We're there to serve their vision. So listening, what do you want? What's your vision for this intimate moment? How's it going to be filmed? Very often inviting storyboards. you know, text is one thing, but of course the visuals is really important. It's not just what the choreography is, but where the camera is going to be. So to make a storyboard so we can all be really clear about what it is that you want. And I always say to the director, and you speak to the actors first, so that everything comes from you, that everybody's serving your vision. And only once the director has spoken to the actors, then will I go and check in. Okay, great. You know what's wanted. You know what the scene is. What are your requirements? You know, what are you comfortable with? What are your requirements regarding the simulated sexual content, about the degrees of nudity and the touch that you're comfortable with? And then we set about, you know, communicating that. So it might mean that, say you want someone in a shower and a performer saying, okay, you can see my back down to the small of my back, you can't see my buttocks, you could, yes, at all, no side buttocks, you can see the front of my body up to the top of my chest, no nipples, you can see my legs from mid-thigh down. So, you know, so that that performer is giving us those requirements of what's okay for them. We'll put in place, we'll then go back to the wardrobe, we'll connect in with what modesty garments need to be prepared for that actor to feel comfortable. We'll feed that back to the director so they know, and the DOP, so that they know the kind of, they can still get the influence of all that nakedness, of that beautiful moment of a shower without overstepping the actor's nude requirements, but still giving the director, you know, the physical storytelling that they want.
That's very good. And I mean, this also makes me think of a question that I had about sort of how much standardization there is. And it sounds like it really does vary from project to project. But I did wonder, do all productions now have a set of do's and don'ts to follow when they're planning these scenes? Or, as I say, do these standards sort of vary from project to project, depending on, I suppose, budget, needs of performers, etc.? Kirsten, let's start with your experience.
My experience has been it's kind of all over the place, and not in a bad way. That's like that made it sound bad, but like every project needs something different. There's one show that I've worked on where everyone wanted to do like some sort of tap in, tap out situation. There was another show that I worked on where that wasn't helpful. Like people needed their space, you know. So to say it's like, and I think that certain standards are great. Like the idea that an intimacy coordinator is going to come in and we're going to talk about boundaries and we're going to do, you know, X, Y, Z in order to get to this point. Those are great. But I think that also every production is different. And once we get to the point of, you know, if anybody's ever bought one of those one size fits all things, you know that it's more like one size fits, like not even most, like this group of people, and this is the group of people that we wanted to, you know, that it works for.
One size kind of fits most, yeah.
Yeah, one size fits enough people, and that we'll call it a day. So yeah, and also, like I said, people are like, I don't even know, like this might be their first time working with an intimacy. It might be their first time working at all as a director or as a performer. So just like, I think I will say that about 3 productions that I've worked on have had a standard, but it was because this is the way that I operate. And I imagine that they would do something different if a different intimacy designer came in and operated differently. Same results, but they don't have like this is our board of things that we do.
No, that makes sense. And Ito, what about you? How much sort of standardization have you found that there is versus how much of it just varies from production to production?
So for me, the fundamental tenets, I mean, I speak about the 3 overriding tenets: open communication and transparency, and then agreement and consent, and then clear choreography. You know, IDC has the 5 pillars. You know, so the different you know, sort of like intimacy coordinators and the different intimacy coordinator practitioners, you know, have slightly different pathways in, but the fundamental for me is that the open communication, transparency, agreement and consent, and clear choreography. But within that structure, you know, then each production is different. Sort of, you know, and I say that that you're offering a process and you're offering, you know, professional procedures, but within that, how it's delivered is the job. Actually, the job is, then being able to adapt and change, listening to this producer, listening to that director with how they want to work. Perhaps you're with a, then a really experienced, sort of like lead cast with someone who's just come out of drama school. Each practitioner needs to be held in a different way, will need different degrees of support. And as Kirsten was saying, that is the job. The job is then, how do you hold that? How do you listen? And when listen, it's in all those check-ins. How do you listen, not just with what someone says, but how they say it, how they hold their body, what their concerns are, and in all of those check-ins. And then it's not just the performers, listening, how do you integrate with the wardrobe? And invariably the wardrobe are the experts in supporting the actor in providing all the modesty garments, and very often have the ear, or historically have had the ear of the actor in all of their concerns. Whereas now, sort of the fact that we're there, sort of, and we're checking all of that out way before we get to the day on set, that takes a lot of the pressure off the wardrobe, but we're absolutely honouring their expertise, and we work in conjunction with their expertise. First AD, by the time they've got to be a first AD, again, is invariably an expert in holding a good close set. So again, it's being their ally, saying, great, how do you like to work? Offering, perhaps there's a couple of tenants that we're bringing in as intimacy coordinators. For example, we're putting in place a timeout. That's as standard, that the actor has the autonomy to halt the action. Putting in place just a bit more of a considered pathway through to nudity. For example, you're going to do your your rehearsed crew showing, actors go away and get ready finally with the right costume, the right modesty garments, but coming back, doing their last rehearsal on camera. And then at that point, if there's nudity, then we ask everybody to step out. So it's just the actors, wardrobe, myself, and director, if that's suitable. So the actors can then, disrobe and explore the choreography with the degree of nudity that's required, making sure that they're comfortable, it's signed off. And of course, rehearsing an intimate scene, with tracksuit bottoms can be very different to then just having a genitalia patch. Suddenly a choreography that felt completely comfortable, you're going, actually, whoa, that feels way too much. Please, can I keep my flesh coloured shorts on? And so you're shifting and adapting it. And that might mean that the camera angle, that they had a clear camera angle from the side, they're saying, okay, now we need to make sure that perhaps you have a two-shot, and perhaps just a line down the back that might give the inference of complete nudity, while it honours the performer's nudity requirements that can shift and change. So we're facilitating, putting all of those aspects in, and being the ally. So this is it. So this is where I say that the job is in, then, like there's a process that you're offering, but the job is in how you adapt, how you, then integrate and listen well, like I say, with not just what people say, but how they say it, honouring how each different practitioner likes to work, supporting that. So as Kirsten was saying, by the time you come to the day on set, we are holding everybody in what their requirements are, so that everybody's on a level playing field. And my intention always is that you're providing a situation, open communication, so that everybody, when they come to the day on set or come to perform in theatre, has been listened to and heard, and is able to work to the top of their game as a professional, be it the director, the first AD, the DOP, the actor. Everybody can work, bringing the best of themselves, the best of their skills, to create a beautiful scene.
No, that's a really good point. And similarly, also touched on the degree to which this work does depend on, as you say, not only what someone is comfortable with, but also how they say it, how they express their comfort and their discomfort. And obviously, this is a little separate from personal expression, but another way that we go about that is through what nudity clauses there are in an actor's contract. And I wonder, too, if these contracts are sort of changing as well to make intimate performance work safer, either structurally or just in terms of the language, if you've noticed any difference just in how these contracts work. Kirsten, we'll start with you.
I haven't gotten the opportunity to work with any nudity, so I don't know yet.
Ita, what about you?
So yes, actually, that was working with the nudity clauses is is part of the development of the role, and was really quite challenging in the early days. I remember there was one of my productions in 2018, and I was up in the middle of the night. I was in the UK and with the lawyers in America, journeying through those first days of shifting those contracts. So what we're looking at now is setting out clearly, and this is where rehearsals is so important, and that communication before the day on set. So the clause, the one paragraph that goes, this, the performer agrees to perform, and then whatever the degree is of simulated sexual content. And then again, that's where bringing in the movement skills, we can go beat 1 is this, beat 2 is this, beat 3 is this. So what the actor agrees to is really clear and set out, and that has come from, again, that communication with the director, interrogating the script, and the point of rehearsal, so that that clause can be written out, and then also that agreement of this is what nudity is agreed to. And then the next thing that has been a shift and change is, in the past, if for whatever reason a performer then didn't want to, withdrew their consent and didn't want to perform it, or wasn't able to perform that scene for any reason, that it used to be that then a body double would be sourced, and it used to be that that once the body double was sourced, that they could do any degree of intimate content with any degree of nudity. And very often what would happen was that people from the adult community would be brought in, and so I've had agents speak to me about their performer, their actor, sort of knew that a body double was performing it, but when they didn't have an opportunity to see it before the content went out into to an audience, and pretty much was pornographic content, and of course the whole of the world thought that was that actor performing that, and of course that can really make an actor incredibly vulnerable. So that's not suitable. So now what we do is put in that clause that if a body double is required, that body double will perform the same degree of choreography that has been agreed already by the performer, and the same degree of nudity content that has been agreed by the performer. And then the other thing that we offer to put in place, and then it's a negotiation with the producer and the performer, is if a body double is sourced, that the actors have the autonomy to agree the body that's going to represent their bodies. All our bodies come in all shapes and sizes, and and again, that's something that's really important, and some productions embrace that and are really happy with it. It does take a little bit more time, that when you have to go through the process, invariably, and then I'm facilitating that as the intimacy coordinator, receiving those the images of those that are offering themselves up to be the body double, getting that agreed by the producers, and then going to those performers, and then of those that the producers are happy with, and getting the performer to agree it. So it takes that bit more time, but what's really positive about that is that then it means, again, everybody is feeling listened to, heard, empowered and autonomous, and again, everybody's feeling respected and can stay open and free, working to the best of their game as an actor. And then the last thing that's really, really important, it used to be that the last clause would say, once the content's been filmed, then the production owns it, and they can do whatever they like with it, basically. And and that can be, again, quite damaging for a performer. What keeps a performer safe is that intimate content. Well, first of all, we're looking at, in that the creation of that content. How does this scene push the storytelling forward? What does it tell us about each character and relationship? We're basically making sure that scene, the actor can really be full of what this character's intention is, what this scene is saying, what's it telling us, and that's what fills the actor up and allows them to not feel vulnerable, to be able to really be artistically full of what this physical storytelling is for this moment. So and when that scene is shown within the arc of the storytelling, that fulfills that requirement for the actor. If that content is taken out of context, it can be incredibly vulnerable making, again, for the performer. So, for example, I checked in with a performer, and they said the intimate scene that they performed was they were very happy with it in the arc of the storytelling and in the filming of it, but the production, without needing to gain their agreement and consent, just took that scene and used it pretty much as the whole of the trailer. And she said that by the time that production came out, that they were incredibly vulnerable. So now, sort of, putting in that clause that the production has to check back with the actor for any intimacy and nudity content if they want to use that content for any stills or in any publicity. And again, it's not that that content can't be used, but it is that it can't be used without the agreement and consent of the performer. And I think that's very important as well.
Yeah, all of these that you've outlined are really important shifts, and really speak to the sort of broadness of how people's boundaries are formed and how we must be respectful of them all the different ways. And I mean, one thing that occurs to me also is that so many industry shifts in the wake of Me Too have seemed pretty incremental, but it seems that the industry has evolved pretty quickly on this specific issue. And I wondered why you think it is that this is one area in which change was able to happen a little faster, perhaps. Kirsten, let's love to hear from you first.
Sure. There are two reasons that I see very clearly, and I'm sure there's a slew of other ones. Was we had a really good narrative for this. There was a very clear awful person, like these awful producers, awful directors, that we could like embody into and say all of this and put all of that into this Harvey Weinstein. We can make that is the face of the awful person, and then we had all of these beautiful actresses who are like, this is sad, this is a bad thing that's going on. There was a clear narrative of we need to protect these people from this person, and look, we have a solution that you can basically you can buy. You can get this person to hire this person to come in, and that'll separate this from this. And that's like a really big oversimplification of what it is that we do. And also like, there are no intimacy, coordinators at parties or whatever, but what we wanted was a culture shift. And we were like, this is a way that we can, that production companies, that theater companies, whoever can show that we're with this culture shift, because we don't want to get left behind. Nobody wants to get canceled. And I think also there was this power of, I'm going to be frank, in part, it is because of the fact that people are really interested in the protection of white women. And as the Me Too movement took off, because it started with, this research project that was being done by a Black woman, and as it took off, we started seeing less and less Black women, we started seeing less and less trans people being placed in the forefront. We started seeing more and more white women talking about this, and more people doing things, and that's where we started to see real change. So that was, I think, a big part of it is the protection of women, specifically white cis women, from the people that we had placed as the bad guys, which was white cis men, which I'm glad that we got to where we are. I wish we had done it a different way, because it's like anyone can be there was I think it was, I'm not going to say a name because I don't want to get it wrong, but there was someone who was saying, I don't want to do another sex scene that's directed by a man. Women can be agents of misogyny. Women can, cross boundaries. Women can be awful. All people have the capacity to do harm. And all people have the capacity to be kind. And like, yes, to answer the question, I have a whole rant about this. But to answer this question is, I think that the main things we had a really clear narrative, and there was a solution, and there was a really clear solution. There were these people who were already doing it even before 2015 and stuff like that, who had a general idea, and then they could say, okay, we're going to call ourselves this and package it. It was almost as good as any, 1950 commercial of, where you see this, or infomercial where you see like the people fumbling with all of these Tupperware containers, and then they like, here's the solution. So yeah, that was some of the big parts of it.
No, that's a really good point, especially about the degree to which our ability to craft a narrative with certain cultural avatars sort of helps us actually pursue action on a cause, and how the sort of origins of it can affect that. Ita, did you have anything to add to that?
Sorry, my brain's just fizzing with all the brilliant points that Kirsten has brought up. So can you just re-ask the question?
Yes. Yes, essentially just when we see that in this industry that so many shifts have been incremental, especially post Me Too, I wonder if there are any reasons that Kirsten didn't already outline that you think we were able to achieve progress on this a little more quickly than some of the others.
This is it. I think, historically, it's been spoken about so much, both in theatre and TV and film, and in our drama schools, about the unsafe practices that that were going on in the void of actually having the awareness that actually it is a body dance, that I felt bad practice that is done. Of course, there's some practitioners who are using the intimate content to be able to be harassing and predatory. But so much of bad practice or questionable practice or uncomfortable practice was actually done because there wasn't a forum in which to be able to work with intimacy in a professional way. And directors were left vulnerable themselves. Many directors were as scared themselves of dealing with the intimate content because there wasn't this awareness of actually this is a body dance. If you're putting two people together to be in close contact with each other, to try and move in rhythm with each other, to represent sexual content, it is a body dance. And so you do need a professional that can bring those skills. And then just like a fight, if you're going to ask someone to have a sword in their hand or to jump from roof to roof, there's a risk that they're going to be injured, but that injury is physical. Whereas the injury from intimate content can be physical, but more often than not, it's emotional and psychological. And that injury is not seen. And that for me was a tipping point with the Weinstein allegations, is that finally, while everybody had spoken about it, that injury was being listened to and heard. And then therefore the productions and the producers had to know that they had to mitigate against that. Unfortunately, it does come down to money. Sort of if a producer's worried that they're going to be sued, then they're going to make sure that they put in place a clear process. But within that sort of, and then Kirsten is right also, that I feel, as you can hear from my work, I was considering this from 2014, gradually developing best practice, being invited to teach this work. But in the early days, the narratives were still there. Oh, you're an actor. You should be able to be naked. You should be able to do any intimate content because that's what the job entails. And no question and no process put in place to actually allow for the fact that just because someone's an actor doesn't mean that they should inherently be able to be comfortable with being completely naked, or to have their body touched wherever, or to do any stimulated sexual content. And just because someone is able to be is comfortable with their nakedness does not mean that they're a brilliant actor or the right actor for the job. And conversely, again, it works both ways. Producers want the best actors for that role, but that doesn't mean that they can necessarily just fulfill whatever degree of nudity and whatever degree of sexual content is required for that role. And that's what was confused, in the narrative. If you're an actor, this is what's asked of you, and this is what you should be able to do. And that's where we're able to separate that out. You wouldn't say to an actor, well, you're an actor, so you should be able to do any stunt, to have a sword play in your hand. You wouldn't expect that, or to do any form of choreography without the need of support of a practitioner, be it a choreographer or a fight director or a stunt coordinator. They know they need a practitioner to bring in those skills, and the director knows that they don't have those skills, and they're going to bring in that practitioner. Well, that's what we were unpicking. That's what we were inviting. You as a director should not need to know how to help to develop an intimate scene with this body dance. And there is a risk, just like, there is a risk assessment taken when someone's nakedness and intimate touch is at play, then there's a risk to that person of feeling harassed or abused. And so that needs to be taken care of. And that's, again, part of what we put in place as intimacy coordinators. And then that aspect of practitioners who have body knowledge, and then have anatomy knowledge, who do the work of making sure that each demographic that you're working with, be it a straight cis relationship, or whether it's a queer lesbian relationship, or whether it's a trans moment of intimacy, that's where then they're going to want to make sure that every single quality and moment of these character storytelling is honored. If it's something that the actors know that then you can get on and doing it. But again, as any actor, if the content is outside of your experience, then you well make sure you go and research it. So you make sure that that demographic, that aspect of society is honored, and the detail that you bring to that choreography is absolutely right. But as but that work was, that I was already doing that work, and also in America, Tonya Sina had already started investigating that, and developed, the role of and the process of intimacy coordination. Alicia Rodas was already asked onto the Deuce sort of before, I believe, the Weinstein allegations, and so there was an aspect, and for myself as well, that I was there. And I find it incredible when there's a meme across the globe, that I was working. I didn't know anything about, Alicia Rodas or Tonya Sina at the time, but we were both developing it, and then the tipping point came where it was finally able to be listened to and heard. And I just want to say one other thing for me also, as Kirsten was saying, okay, it might have come from listening to cis white women, but I would like to say that for me, it is about bringing respect for everybody. Everybody of whatever race, religion, color of skin, sort of demographic you are, of how you express your gender or your sexuality. This is about bringing parity across the board for everybody, and it's for so that so that everybody can be listened to and heard. Everybody is invited to work with respect for everybody else. That gives it a platform and a structure that, again, that everybody feels listened to, heard, empowered, autonomous, and can work, bringing the best of their skills to whatever role they have on a production.
Those were all excellent points. Thank you, both of you, for your just thorough and wonderful answers to all of these questions. I'd love to just leave you with one more, which is, now that intimacy coordinators are pretty well established in the industry, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you'd like to see next. What accommodations or further shifts you'd like to see in the industry when it comes to, as we've been talking about, respecting people's boundaries and enabling everybody to do their best work. So Kirsten, I'd love to hear from you first.
Yeah. One of the things that I'd like to see is more emphasis on the cultural competencies of intimacy specialists. Wanting to see, because my background is in theater, and I've seen so many plays where it's like someone has staged a specific, a show that comes to mind is they were staging two Black folks who were having this intimate moment, and the actress had this beautiful, wonderful twist out, just a serious crown. And her boyfriend goes and he reaches in her hair like this. And I was like, whoever staged this either didn't matter, or they didn't know that that's not usual. Unless if this happens, then it's about that. It's about the touching of the hair. There's something, it's not, that's just not I don't want to say that it's that no one does it, but it is different. And I saw a lot of the other Black people in the audience being like, because we thought that was going to become a thing, because it looked like she had just done it. It's like, don't mess that up. But it's like asking, who is this scene for? Is it so that this group of people in the dominant class, the donor class, will get it, or is it for the people who know this culture and who know that this is how things go? And also, I think having more trainings in cultural competency, more cultural specialists, as well as understanding that not every IC is for every show, of being like, great, that you do have a really great resume, but I think it would be better if this person was from the community that we are trying to show on TV or in film. And then another thing that I think that I would love to see is more emphasis on intimacy coordinators being invited to spaces that are not explicitly sex, more birth scenes. And as we're coming out of like 2020, I'm expecting a lot more, there has been, and there probably will be more stuff that is about police brutality and stuff like that. Put somebody on deck to, see if that, if these people need a break. All of these, it's Black History Month. There's a lot of, shows about enslavement where maybe there is no sex, but still this is calling on ancestral trauma. This is calling on a lot of different stuff. And then the last thing, same thing with like the movies about queer people, because as long as we are, a thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure other people have, is that a lot of times when we're talking about people who are not a part of the dominant class, we usually want to see them overcome a thing. And all of those things that we overcome, we don't necessarily get to walk away from that. When the show is done, it's not, okay, now I don't have to deal with racism, or now I don't have to deal with homophobia anymore. It's like, that can still happen to me, and I need somebody to help me close this book. In all of those things. And then another is wanting to move towards, like, most people want to have their practices as an intimacy coordinator be trauma informed, but I think sometimes we end up being trauma centered, or like assume that people want to work with their body in this way, or assuming that people might have an issue with this or have an issue with that. And I'm seeing it more with like directors and actual ICs, but like wanting to bring the culture of consent to everyone, and that it's not about what if somebody was traumatized before they got into this show and now I don't want to reactivate it. It's like, or maybe it's just everyone's boundaries should be considered, and we don't have to know what happened to you beforehand, or what, or be thinking about, we don't want to traumatize anyone with these things. Maybe it's not even, let's not even go that far. It's sometimes just about people should be able to have boundaries, period. And we don't need to talk about why. And so like just sort of moving towards a culture of consent when the ICs aren't there. Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. Ita, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Sorry, yes, I need to ask you again.
Yes, apologies. Yes. So in terms of, we see now intimacy coordinators are pretty well established in the industry, but I wonder if there's any shifts or movements that you'd like to see happen in the future where intimate scenes are concerned.
Okay, so first of all, I feel for the role to be trusted and respected within the industry, we need to make sure that that the training of intimacy coordinators is really robust and put in place. And then also that there's regulation, that just as there is, if someone's going to set themselves up as a choreographer, there's a certain amount of training they need to go through, and and to be able to be certified as a really good choreographer. There's a stunt coordinator. There's a whole group of training that they need to go through that takes an arc of time, and that's right and proper, because if a stunt coordinator is going to say that they can keep someone safe, they need to, they're going to be able to teach them to sword fight, to throw a punch, to ride a horse. That all needs training so that when that person comes on set, firearms, to make sure that they really are going to keep someone safe. It's the same with the intimacy coordination. While the process is quite simple, actually the holding is incredibly complex. And as you can hear, we're serving the producer, the director, the actor, the first AD, the DOP, the crew. Each of those holdings takes, a different presence of self, and then to bring in choreographic skills, to be able to be present and understand, and to be able to interrogate the intimate, or the actor director process of what is this scene, who are these characters. So all of that takes skills, and so I do feel it's really important that that the training is not necessarily standardized, but there's safeguarding put in place, that the trainers are accredited as trainers. So I've been working with SAG-AFTRA at the moment, and they're saying that, they're asking that the trainers of intimacy coordinators need to have a minimum of 250 days on set. And I'm going, yes, that feels right to me. That's good and proper. And then for myself, as training my intimacy coordinators, I thought that my intimacy coordinators have to have a minimum of 50 days on set over a minimum of 5 productions, of which a maximum can be 25 on any one production. So that, and of course, it's in those different productions in which that learning and that developing skills and having to handle, the different demographics that comes about. For theatre, my practitioners have to have a minimum of 25 days of experience over a minimum of 5 productions, of which 3 need to be on an arc of a whole production, because again, that's the holding where someone actually really gets experience of being able to hold the space in a good way. And for intimacy pedagogy, as in a teacher of intimacy, that have to have a minimum of 100 hours experience with a maximum of 50 on set. And for me, it's important that experience is required before they can present themselves, be fully accredited, so that by the time they're presenting themselves to a producer, to a production, and saying that they're fully accredited, that they actually have experience that can be trusted. And unfortunately, what's happened, especially during COVID times, that I had a group of intimacy coordinators, and then suddenly come March 2020, there was no opportunity to get them on set because of COVID, and all the productions were either closed down, and when they were opening up, then they didn't want to have extra bodies on set. So there's been a devoid of opportunities to continue really robustly journeying those practitioners. And then also for myself as a trainer, I was really concerned about inviting people to be present in the room, for myself, to make sure that the insurance that I had was robust and the processes and protocols I had around COVID were robust. So there's sort of been a void in a continuation of intimacy coordinators being trained. And as Kirsten says, it's really important that we have intimacy coordinators from all walks of life, from all ethnicities, from all genders, so that, as Kirsten said, it's absolutely that I'm always looking for who is the right practitioner to go on a particular production, so that they're the right fit, they bring the right skills. So that takes time. And while the industry or the role is in its early days, again, what can I I want to help to be part of supporting the whole industry to make sure that training is put in place, that the trust of the role is put in place. And that can only come from all of us to really make sure that the practitioners in the industry who are fully accredited really can hold the space in a really good way, so that the role can stay being trusted.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, both of you, for all of these wonderful insights and for this great conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Laura. It's been an absolute joy. Thank you to Melissa and the whole of the Athena Festival for inviting me to come. And also, it's lovely to hear Kirsten hearing of your practice as well.
Thank you all so much. This was fun.